Welcome everyone to Almost Cancelled. I am Peter, and today I'm going to be talking about All of Us Are Dead, episode 4. So full spoilers for the episode. And it's another good one, and I've got a lot of things to talk about and praise. Not quite pat myself in the back necessarily, but I did mention last episode, I talked about the parallels between the kids in the school, and then Onjo's father and his, survivors that he's, helping and dealing with. And I said that there were some parallels between them, right? And that was maybe something that we're going to continue. And sure enough, this episode didn't even let it be subtext. This episode gave us a montage where they were doing the same task in both areas. But it still showed the differences. And what I loved about it is how quickly the adults, or not even the adults, just Onjo's father, really, because he's the expert, right? He's the one who's been trained for situations. He knows his stuff. I love that when we cut to them, he just immediately says, "This is what we have to do. Boom, boom, boom," because we have to go to the bathroom. But before that scene, there is a good 5, maybe close to 10 minutes of conversation about bathrooming, about where they're going to go to the bathroom, different ideas of how they should go, and even just the slow admittance that it's something they have to think about. The idea that one person admits, I can't go to the bathroom, and then someone else admits they need to go to the bathroom, and then it kind of escalates to all of them realizing that it's been a number of hours now, it's late in the evening, it's been, this all kicked off lunchtime. So, we're talking a good, anything between 7 and 11 hours or something like that, or maybe even later, since all this started, and they've not been at the bathroom since. So it makes sense that they all need to go. And there's ideas thrown out there, and this is kind of what I love about survival shows, is just all these obstacles that are put in place. Because as soon as I started talking about this, I'm like, well, if you're going to be here for a while, you're going to have to start thinking about food and water, and what is the goal with that. And that's a subject that's brought up later in the episode, but not one they quite get to dealing with yet, because we are moving through a relatively decompressed pace, which I like a lot, actually, because it gives us a chance for them to have these one by one, these realizations, and try and problem solve. And honestly, given how dark the episode starts with something else, which I'll get to, it's impressive just how quickly it turns into this humorous scene of them being too shy to talk about going to the bathroom. And the idea, and honestly, Daesu, who's the sort of the chunkier guy, he suggests that they use the window, and I'll be honest, I didn't think that was a terrible idea. Right, obviously put up some stuff to give someone privacy to stick their ass out the window, but I didn't think it was a terrible idea, because at least it would keep the smell away. At least on that front. I mean, maybe it would attract the zombies because they would see things coming down, so maybe there's a bad reason for it, but at the very least it wasn't the worst idea in the world. And it kind of gets to this point where it's Onjo, because she's obviously picked up some stuff from her father, says, look, you have to keep your toilet separate from where you're sleeping. So they end up doing a little bit of makeshift moving around. They block off the window to the recording booth, and they're going to use the recording booth as a bathroom. They put filing cabinets around to give the person privacy, and they just build a little soft thing to absorb the piss and the poo. Urine and excrement would have been the scientific way of saying that, but my mind blanked for a second, and I just went with the most juvenile way of saying it. Anyway, and there's even humor about coming out of the bathroom after the guy who needs to go for a poop, and just how bad it smells, and how the next person's willing to try and wait even longer just to try and let the smell go away a little bit. And it's one of those things where that could be very, I mean, it is lowbrow humor, but it works in the context, because the issue of going to the bathroom was treated as a real thing that has to be done, and their slight immaturity of approaching the subject just felt natural. But the ultimate joke that it would stink in there, right? It's not a bathroom, nothing's being flushed, it would stink to the high heavens. So all of it makes sense, none of it feels like a cheap joke, it just feels like it's naturally in there as part of the plot. And they started to doubt if people are coming. There's a couple of nice moments with Onjo and Chung-san as they talk about his friend who died last episode. She talks about her friend, and he refuses to admit that he cares, that she cares about him, and they both refuse. Later on when he's leaving to go on his possible, his very dangerous mission, she even, he's like, don't worry about me. And she's like, I'm not worried about you. I'm angry. And I'm like, come on, both of you. And what's really nice about this relationship is that it's not really a love triangle anymore, right? Because, Suhak, he's clearly into class president girl. There's a great moment when they're climbing outside again later on, because Chung San's going, there's that interaction with Onjo, and then Suhak, he wants to go with and give him back up. So again, makes him likable, right? Even though he's technically the potential antagonist in a love triangle, but it's not really a love triangle, like I said, because there's a moment here where they're climbing to get to another window because they're trying to get to some phones so they can get to the internet and so on and so on. They're about to pass over a really dangerous part where they're crossing over to the next window where the wall kind of comes out a bit, and Chung San turns and says, what are you going to do? And the response he gets is oh, I'll try and grip onto that, and you knew, I think everyone watching the show, the audience, it all knows what he means. He's not talking about what they're doing right now. He's talking about Onjo, and it's actually quite sweet and funny. And what makes it perfect though, and what takes all the potential bullshit of the the dreaded love triangle that you usually get in TV shows, is Sehuk's reaction. He clocks on why he's asking this, and he starts prodding, and he smiles at him. That shit-eating grin he has in his face where he goes, why do you think I should I, do you want me to go out with her? That was perfect. It was perfect because it was he understands that these two feel this way about each other, that he has no real interest in getting in the middle of it, really, right? He clearly has something for someone else, for a start, but even without that, his reaction to this didn't come off as, I'm going to be an antagonist to you. His reaction came off as someone who's going to root for them all along. But that's what it felt like. It felt kind of sweet. I talked about how sweet it was between Chung San and Onjo from episode 1, and how they did a good job making me kind of like both of them and making me kind of, see the chemistry in the relationship. But they've even taken the third potential person in this potential triangle, which I don't really think is a triangle anymore. I think this episode kind of cinched that it was there to kind of set things up and set up this dynamic between the main pair, but it's not really a love triangle narratively in the long-term sense. This has set him up as just as likable and made us almost connect with him as the audience, because he kind of got it, and he kind of was enjoying how stupid Chung San's being about this, and that was kind of lovable to watch. So I really enjoyed that moment. I think it worked really well. Obviously when they get to the phones, there's some trouble, because they realize, or they run into rather, the girl from the roof, who obviously we see more of her and the other bullied kid on the roof this episode, where she finds out that the bully set a timer on the footage that was recorded of her with her clothes off to post, I think it was to Instagram, and if the guy didn't pay him by 9 a.m. this following morning, because it's not in the morning by the time all this is happening, then he would it will go up automatically, right? He has to cancel it. And she's determined to go and get the phone. And there's a couple of really good little beats here, actually, in terms of where the guy keeps trying to tell her that she doesn't really want to die. She wants to live, and he's trying to give her the pep talks, but he's also very nervous. He's very timid himself. And there's a great, disappointing moment in a good way. And by that, I mean, I think you're meant to feel the disappointment, is that she asks if he'll come with her, and he gets too scared, but there's a moment where she walks through the roof door, and she sort of stands there waiting to see if he's going to catch the door, and you hear it close behind her, and there's just this sense of disappointment, and you're kind of rooting for him for about 5 seconds. You're really rooting for him to make the choice to come and help, and I actually still thought he was going to come and help. I thought he was going to come and help when she was about to get mobbed by zombies, which is its own interesting development on its own, is that she gets bit by a horde of zombies, all over her arms and back, and the zombies, after a little bite, decide that they don't really want her. There's something different about her, which, forgetting the literal, zombie virus mechanics here, which I'll speak about in a second, narratively, this is just a really cruel irony that goes with her character, because she feels like an outcast in life, and this kind of makes her an outcast even in death, because even the zombies don't want her. And then the idea that she might be different because she's not turning as quick or quite the same way as other people do. I actually just thought she was straight up immune. She was kind of getting a little bit of the click at one point, but then she kind of came back and she was still speaking, and she's still, there. Very curious. I wonder if it's just some people will have a natural immunity. I wonder if there's something specific to her. Is there a condition she has that does this? Because it's one thing the zombies don't want her, and I was actually genuinely shocked that I thought they might be killing her here, because I was like, oh damn, this is really tragic. If she just left that roof to go get this phone from the teacher's lounge and now she's dead, that's really sad. But then she gets back up, and I'm like, oh, is she immune? Does the zombies not wanting her blood or not wanting her flesh, is that an indication that she is different enough that maybe she has some sort of immunity? That begs a lot of interesting questions. It makes her a very important character. It might mean that ultimately she ends up being one of the most important person there is, which might, give her that boost in the confidence. So that's a big thing. But like I say, there's some thematic ironies with that to go along with her like living persona, as it were. Although I will say this, she's a bit of an idiot because she seems to think that smashing the phones that are there is going to stop this photo from being uploaded. If it was already set to publish on Instagram, then Instagram already has the photo. It's already been uploaded. It's just waiting for the time to publish it. Like, smashing the phones will do nothing here, as far as I'm aware. Someone correct me if I am wrong, but I feel like this is how it works. I don't really use Instagram that much, but I feel like this is how everything else works. When you schedule a post, it's already got the information. It's just waiting to put it out. But yeah, so she's smashing all the phones, and that's where our two main characters come in and see her smashing the phones, and they're like, shit, we need those. We need a phone. We need the internet. So we get a bit of a slapdash action sequence to kind of try and get some phones. Chung-san does eventually get one. He sort of ducks and dives. They kind of fight her, not even realizing. I mean, I think she does yell something at one point, so they know she's not a zombie completely. But she is acting very dangerous. She's coming for them, and she does seem to get back up into the scene. They have to leave separately. Se-hyuk goes back out the window. Chung-san runs into the hall, and he ends up in the principal's area. Which again, so I'm doing a lot of this episode. There's a lot of like characters like crossing over into other characters' plots this episode. Because the bully's in here. So let's backtrack and talk about the bully. The bully's snooping around. He's trying to escape on a bike. He fails miserably. We get a little bit of an action scene. Ultimately, though, he runs into the principal's office. There really wasn't a lot to describe with his story. It does take up a few scenes, but it's mostly just, running, bit of action, atmosphere. It's all right. But the principal and this bully kind of deserve each other in a lot of ways, because the principal's like, hey, you go get my car and drive it under the window, and then I'll jump down. You go do the dangerous bit and save me. So the principal's a shithead. Not that he deserves to have his throat slashed, which is what happens by the end of this episode. Which, this bully elevates himself from, really awful human being in a general sense, for everything we've seen him do, to then murdering zombies. And last episode he threw someone at a zombie kind of to defend himself, which is shitty enough, but there's a difference between, it's still horrible, don't get me wrong, but there's another leap here to just taking a knife and slashing someone's throat and thinking you can get away with it. And in a sense you can, no one's going to investigate any murders that happen in the school at this point. There's too much death, right? And this is actually a very good character moment for Chung-san, because as soon as he gets in the room, as soon as he sees the bully tying up the principal, and then as he gets threatening, and then when he kills the principal, everything Chung-san says, just establishes or reestablishes why he is the one of the lead heroes of the show, why we should root for him, because he's inherently good, right? He's obviously childish in a lot of ways because of his age, but he's inherently a good person, and it immediately starts filming what's happening so that he can't, so the bully in theory shouldn't be able to do anything, and he tries to hide the knife behind his back like right tit. But Chung-san, everything he says in this scene where you shouldn't do this, this is wrong, I can't remember the exact lines of dialogue, line for line, but everything he said and did, and the proof that he tried to keep of what was happening to make sure that there could be some kind of consequence for whatever he did, was kind of like, oh, this is like really nice. This is why we're rooting for you, because you are inherently a good person. So good character beat for him, which is really nice. Yeah, we end up with them kind of ducking and diving and fighting. The cliffhanger of the episode is actually the bully throwing the knife at Chung San's back. I presume the handle hits him in the back, and that'll be what we find out at the start of next episode. But all of this is very solid stuff where, and I think what I really liked about this interaction between the main bully here and Chung San, apart from the fact that it showed that Chung San is such a good person because he's contrasted with this asshole, is that because we've not really seen them interact that much. I mean, I think they were in the same class at one point in episode 1 or whatever, but there hasn't been much. So there's been this build to this moment where we've not really seen what they're like together. So you give us essentially our lead hero, and you give us her main antagonist, and all of a sudden you put them in a room together, and because you waited till towards the end of episode 4 to do this, they're so well established on their own that it does kind of feel like, you know, I don't want to use the phrase clashing of titans, because that's a bit over the top and grandiose, but it is kind of in the sense that I mean that both the characters have had enough time to be established on their own that it feels like two fully formed characters finally butting heads, as opposed to in an episode 1 where you throw two people in a room and conflict's there. But conflict feels, you know, it inherently starts off, you have to use different tricks to make it work right away like that. But when you put two characters in a room where we understand who both of them are, and immediately there's a conflict, it feels very true to who the characters are because we already know them. And that gives it this weight. It gives it this more kind of like a moral battle playing out on top of everything else, which goes back to the last episode. And even the start, I didn't go back to the start of this. So before the piss and shit talk, there was the one girl who, when they were talking about the teacher and the rich girl, let me just get her name here, Nayeon. When Nayeon left the room last episode and the teacher ran out after her, and you know, we don't know what happened to them, and they talk about how they didn't hear her scream. Something they don't answer this episode. We don't see if they're alive. I presume they are, but we don't see them. She talks about, well, should we care if she's alive? Because she murdered one of us. She's awful. She's a terrible person. Why should we care? And I'm actually glad that I was able to go back and talk about this scene. Not just because them having this debate and everyone's saying, well, no, because, well, first of all, what about Miss Park? And secondly, like, that's just wrong. Like, we shouldn't think like that. And that feeds into what Miss Park said last episode, is if you're not willing to save each other, then everything's meaningless, right? So there's kind of like a moral fight for humanity going on in the themes of this zombie show. And I think that's something that sort of like is there throughout. You could almost see the zombies themselves as like giving into the rage, giving into your lowest, most base instincts. That's kind of what the scientist describes it as later on in the episode when he's given some more backstory. But the idea that no, we're better than that because we have empathy, because we have compassion, because we can understand people have made mistakes, because we can be better. All those qualities. So I love that thematic idea there. I also thought this scene was really good. I can't name this the girl who was speaking. It's the other one who's in a ponytail. Unfortunately, there's a few extra characters who I remember. You know, I remember their face. I remember generally like who they are, but they're definitely kind of like the B tier of the characters in that they're not as named as often. They don't have as many plots. But she kind of tears up a little bit as she's yelling, "Why should we care? We did nothing wrong. We did nothing wrong. She brought this on herself." And it kind of felt like, well, she might believe this to an extent. It also felt like she was trying to convince herself that they'd done nothing wrong by just letting them go like that. That maybe she inherently, even though she's saying all these things to try and convince herself, so she kind of looks like the villain in the room at this moment. She's actually a better person than she's given herself credit for, because she's trying to convince herself that she did nothing wrong. And deep down, she knows that they should have done something. They should have stopped her. They should have kept her in, because that would have been the right thing to do. But they were in too much shock over what she did, what Nayeon did, and they were too in shock of the anger of the moment to react or do something more compassionate. And that battle of the morals, I think, has given the show a bit more weight than it otherwise might have, and means that it's not just a fun zombie action show with good, well-written, likable characters and good villains who are also very hateable characters. But it also has this going on as well, that there is kind of this humanity thing. And then you add on that the way it can shift between the tones and have a funny scene about talking about going to the bathroom, which feels very natural because you get that they would be uncomfortable talking about that. And I think circling back to that neatly gives me a nice branch into Onjo's father and everything with him in this episode, which is he immediately just says, okay, we need to do this bathroom thing. And we intercut between them as they're, and in some cases even do like a side by side, showing them like prepping their makeshift bathrooms. And the adults where he is aren't very happy about it or like any of this, so that they have to wait there till morning or anything. And he wants to leave. He tells them that he's going to go and try and save his daughter, and he'll leave the other guy here who's still qualified, but he's going to go. And politician lady says, no, look, I have a family, I could be running to them. Everyone in here's got families that live fairly nearby. They all want to go and check on them. But ultimately, our jobs are to save as many people as possible, not the ones who are close to us necessarily. And kind of gives them the honor, like in service speech kind of thing. And it obviously means that it's actually another little smart bit of writing here is during this scene, she refers to his colleague, the other guy, because there was 3 of them, right? And one's turned into a zombie. So the other guy, she refers to him as a kid. She says, you're going to leave this kid in charge. And, because he's younger and obviously he's not been doing the job as many years, obviously, as Onjo's father has, you're going to leave this kid here. And he gets offended and says, that's not a kid. That's a firefighter. Firefighter? Firefighter. It's a firefighter. And she apologizes and sort of and says, I didn't mean any offense. It was a slip of the tongue. Please don't take anything by it. But that was a really smart moment, because the speech she's about to give him, where she looks out the window and says, this is where her family lives and this is where his family lives, and we're all here because we all have an important job to save everyone or save as many people as possible. This sort of crisis is when our jobs are the toughest, both as a politician and as a firefighter. That speech suddenly has so much more weight, because in the previous part of the conversation, he pointed out that he does have a sense of honor and pride in what his job is, and he defends his colleague when someone dares insinuate that he isn't part of that or he isn't good enough for that. He's like, no, he's trained, he's done his time, and he's one of us, right? So don't you dare dishonor him like that. The fact that he gave that reaction says that this speech will work. This speech will get to him and it will mean something to him. Smart writing. There's actually a lot of little smart things in the writing in this show. And they're becoming a bit more apparent as we're focusing in more and more of the characters and we're getting to know them better. This is not uncommon. This happens a lot. But yeah, we get some fun scenes of them. And this is the other thing I liked about comparing them to the kids, is that everything that happens with them on their way up to the roof is actually very reminiscent of a lot of the things the kids did back in episode 2. Using tables and filing cabinets in this case to hold the zombies back in the hallway, and they even use the fire hose. Now they use it differently. It's not used as a rope. It's used as an actual fire hose. They blast them with water. But I don't think it's an accident that a lot of this similar objects and ideas are being used with them, because there's a nice little touch here that while obviously Onjo's father is trained in crisis situations and survival situations, he knows what the best tactics are in most situations to take. There is some nice little touch of the youth might actually figure some things out better than the adults can, because they were already naturally kind of falling into some of these patterns back in episode 2. I may be reading into that a little bit too much, but I do think there was a little bit of that last episode, and maybe that's something we'll talk about as the show goes on. Maybe the kids will actually make more compassionate decisions about certain things as the show goes on, compared to the adults in charge, and I think that's something we should be looking for. But yeah, I really liked all this. I love the joke towards the end that Onjo's father like is just out of breath, and the other guy thinks he's a zombie because he's like stumbling up the stairs, and he's like, and it's like, no, he's just a man in his 50s who just had to fight off zombies and run up the stairs. Admittedly, he looked like he was in a pretty dire situation when we last saw him, so it's kind of impressive that he did. But I'll forgive maybe the odd convenient escape in a story like this, because ultimately everything we're going to do with the characters is far more entertaining and interesting than, you know, having to nitpick that kind of thing. I do like that the stairwell this took place in, though, was like an external, well, not completely external, but you know what I'm talking about, like the buildings that have the stairwell kind of surrounded by glass, but they're mostly like, you know, sticking out of the building. So when you're in the stairwell, you're basically just seeing outside on every direction except the one that's facing in the way of the building. I'm sure there's a name for these, but I thought that was a nice setting for this scene, because there was some nice shots outside looking in through the window, and nice big wide shots. It was good stuff. And the helicopters arrive towards the end of the episode, and they put down their flare, or the smoke signal, I think it was. But yeah, good stuff. Again, love the mirroring stuff with the kids. I think it's really smart and gives us a nice counterbalance, and it gives us a sense of the scale as well, and that's something that the police station stuff also does. One of the things that I really love about the pacing of this show so far is that we started off just building up to the infection in episode 1, and in episode 2 was basically the school has went to shit, and then by episode 3 though, the hospital's going, and so on and so on. And I love that up until episode 4, the police station and the other like emergency services, from what we saw, were still operating as normal. But this is the episode where we'll know the police station is now overrun. The police are being bitten and turned into zombies. And our main cop, who's been interrogating Scientist Man, he, like, you know, barely makes it out. And Scientist Man has kind of this, almost like a little redemptive moment right before his death. Because he dies this episode, he lets himself be bit pretty much. Because he's very cold about everything that's happening. This is everyone's fault. Like, they all played a part in my son's bullying, my son's death. All, you know, those kind of ideas. So they may as well all die if they can't figure their way out of this. No one listened to me. No, you know, he's very much like that. But it's as he's remembering like what he's done, and he sees like this cop and other people fighting for their lives in front of him in the hallway, where he maybe for the first time, you know, obviously he's seen one zombie before, but he's not seen like the actual chaos in society like this. And I wondered if he, in this kind of moment, kind of realized, no, he does have a choice. He can, like, give, you know, the one piece of useful information that he can, which is, you know, my laptop has answers on it. It's in the science lab at the school, which is good, because now we have a character who's going to try and make his way to the school at some point. He's not going straight there. He's trying to go to some other base, some other emergency service place to give out this information. I suspect, though, if not him, maybe Onjo's father will eventually get this information, and that'll be like a reason to go together to the school to, you know, kill two birds effectively. Try and save the kids, kill his daughter, but also get this important information to maybe come up with some sort of cure. Although I imagine that the bullied girl is going to be also essential in this at this point. So yeah, lots going on in this episode, and all of it intermingling. We didn't even get to see the baby in the chicken shop, although we did see Chung-san's mother. I did not see her dying this quickly. I thought her death was particularly sad at the start of this episode, where her son's best friend, who she yells out to thinking, oh, I know him, kills her with other zombies joining in, and she dies out there whilst you know, the kids are in the room in the school, not knowing this is going on, and it's all just a bit sad. So it's just a really tragic little death, where I felt like they were building her up to have her own little subplot for a little bit, maybe try to get to the school, but she gets there, you know, on the outskirts of the school, and just that's it, she's dead. Which is why later on, I think this set me up to expect that anyone could go almost at any time, maybe outside of the core three characters. Because later on, when the bully girl got bit, I actually was like, okay, I'm surprised they're killing her this quickly, but you know, I can believe it now. And then, you know, then it sort of swerved me with like, no, something's different about this, and she got back up. So very cool stuff. I suppose the one thing I've not talked about yet is the YouTuber or whatever he is, who we start, and again, this shows the scale of everything. This shows the what it's like going around the town now. So we see like the extreme ends of the emergency services, the office building, and of course the school was where we started. But now we get to see just someone trying to sneak through the streets, and eventually get to the. I think it's actually where the baby was left originally, the same little orphanage next to the playground, where a bunch of zombie children come out and chase him, and he drops his camera. I don't think he got killed at the end of the scene though. I think he was still technically alive, just sort of try to stay away from the kids who were trying to get to him. I think he's still alive at the end. Maybe I'm forgetting a death here, but a lot went on this episode. But a lot of this was kind of amusing. You know, he's this stupid idiot who, like, he's going to get himself killed. He's getting with hockey pads. He's wearing hockey pads, you know, and he's like, I've got an axe and I've got water and a first aid kit. I'm going to survive the zombie apocalypse. And of course, you know, later on he's shitting himself as zombies are chasing him down the street. And the chat think it's acting. They don't believe it. I did like the subtle touch though that the chat were tipping as it was going on. It was very Twitch stream-esque, and it was just obviously I couldn't read every comment because the subtitles only covered the important ones because they were going so fast. But you got a good sense of what it was like and what was going on, and them saying the child zombies were cute when they're like probably the most terrifying zombies we've had so far. But you know, I talked in episode 2 about having unique and like standout zombies that you remember. I think there's 2 examples of that again in this episode. I think the kid zombies, not one specific zombie, but as a horde, they're very unique. I think the other one that stuck out bizarrely is Scientist Man, the doctor, the teacher. I thought his transformation where he turned around and looked, it was kind of like the most iconic a zombies looked in the show this far, where it kind of felt like it was almost getting like kind of like a special moment of like, where he seems to be like slightly more, well, this is actually happening, or if it's just like a sort of suggested thematic thing. It felt like the way he was walking slower than all the other zombies, and the way he kind of turned, and it felt like on some level he kind of like understood what he was or accepted what he was. It was interesting. I'd be curious to see if we see him again. I think he had a really distinct look as well, and I don't know if it's just because he's got a bit of stubble or because he's a bit more disheveled with the shaggy hair or what, but there's just something about him with the one eye kind of weighted out just looked really distinct. So it's not as gimmicky as cone zombie or sliding on the floor zombie or whatever, but it did stick out. I thought he looked really distinct to me compared to the other zombies, and I think we might see him sort of bait someone importantly or something. Maybe a villain or something. You know, maybe he'll get the bully because we see this bully as one of the bullies of his kid, and how they. You know, this is part of the reason why the principal's such a shithead, is that he's like, we made them write an apology. They're kids, they make mistakes. Think of the school. Let's not get the police involved. You know, that was his attitude. So it's very easy to think he's a shithead. But yeah, it was a long episode. It was like 70 minutes, but damn, it was packed with a lot of plots, and several of them did intersect. The bully stuff linked in with the main characters, as did the bullies, the bully and the bullied. You know, they both linked in with the main characters as the episode went along. Onjo's father stuff was paralleling the kids' plot, and thematically it was very important to go along with it. And, you know, I think even some of the themes of like doing the right thing and sort of having some humanity left did bleed into the police station stuff by the end. So it's a very tightly feeling together episode in a lot of ways, but is also purely serialized, and because this is a purely serialized show. So I would say that after 4 episodes, I like it even more than I have done thus far, and I've been really enjoying it. So it's good stuff. I cannot wait to watch episode 5. It is trickling up the priority of what I should be doing each day is to get another episode of this done. So I might be getting through them a little bit quicker going forward. I hope so anyway. I do have a lot of editing to do though, so I make no promises. But I'll be back with episode 5 as soon as I can. Let me know what you thought of the episode in the comments below. I always appreciate it. Like, subscribe, ding the bell for notifications, all that stuff. You can get us on Twitter at mail_fuzz for channel updates, and of course you can support everything over at I can't even talk anymore. You can support everything over at patreon.com/mailfuzztv for as little as $1 per month and get some bonuses and keep all the content coming. But that is me. So thank you once again for watching or listening. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?